I never imagined my son would end up in such a situation, not with his fiancée coming from a family like hers. Jake had just proposed to Ruby, and I accompanied him to meet her parents. To my surprise, her father turned out to be none other than Thomas, the renowned owner of a high-end brand store. Jake, nervous but determined, held his own when Thomas fired question after question, but everything changed the moment Thomas discovered my educational background. When he learned I'd only completed middle school, he slapped Jake across the face, a gesture full of disdain. I could hardly contain my fury. How could someone be so arrogant, so blinded by status? "We'll meet again," I muttered, the anger simmering within me. Jake, Ruby, and I left the house and headed straight for the hospital, where I confided in Ruby. "I'm thinking of confronting him," I said, my resolve hardening. Her response only made me more determined. The next day, Thomas was in for a shock. "I'm Alex," I told him, my voice steady. "I'm 69 years old, and since my wife passed, I've lived with my son, Jake. My legs aren't what they used to be, and now I rely on a wheelchair, unable to move without Jake's help. Despite everything, Jake remains my rock, always caring for me, even on his days off." I could see his eyes widen as the weight of my words settled in. As a father, I couldn't have been prouder. Jake had grown into a fine young man, strong and selfless. I still remember the day he proposed to Ruby. It was an evening like any other, until Jake burst through the door, practically glowing. "Dad, I proposed to Ruby," he said, excitement radiating from his face. "Did she say yes?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. Jake made a circle with his hands, grinning from ear to ear. "She said yes, she'll marry me." The moment was one I'll never forget. Tears welled up in my eyes as I congratulated him, the pride I felt overwhelming. "Congratulations, son, you've truly become a man." But then, something shifted in his demeanor. His excitement waned, replaced by anxiety. "What's wrong?" I asked, concerned. "You should be on top of the world right now." "I am, but," Jake hesitated, "now I have to ask for her parents' blessing. I'm terrified." I knew exactly how he felt. I'd been there myself, asking my late wife's father for his approval. It hadn't been easy, and it took many bows before he finally relented. "Don't worry, Jake," I reassured him, clapping him on the back. "If you speak from the heart, they'll see how sincere you are. You're a good man, you work hard, help out around the house, and you're well liked by everyone." "Yeah, I'll do my best," he said, nodding. "That's the spirit," I said, raising my glass. "Here's to your successful proposal." That night, we toasted with our best sake, and the stage was set for the marriage meeting. Ruby had chosen a traditional restaurant, but one that was wheelchair accessible, showing just how thoughtful she was. I was certain Jake had made a wise choice in her. They'd be happy together, I was sure of it. I felt a sudden urge to buy Jake a gift, something meaningful to give him confidence. I went to a high-end department store with my assistant. Browsing the shelves, I found a beautiful set of couples bowls, but quickly reminded myself that Jake still hadn't received Ruby's parents' approval. It felt premature, so I decided to head to a men's boutique instead. As I searched for something fitting, I asked a salesperson for assistance, but he completely ignored me, his gaze cold as soon as he saw my wheelchair. "Excuse me," I repeated, but this time, he sneered and said, "We don't have anything suitable for someone like you here." I was stunned. Before I could respond, a man in a suit emerged from the back, and the staff quickly bowed to him. It was Thomas, the very same man who had slapped Jake. He was the president of the store's parent company. At that moment, my blood boiled. I approached him, hoping he would address the employee's rudeness. "I've been treated horribly by your staff," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Thomas's reaction was worse than I imagined. "Oh, what's the problem?" he asked, a dismissive smile on his face. When I told him what had happened, he scoffed. "This is a high-end men's store. If you're not satisfied, perhaps you should go somewhere else," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. I was shocked. "Can you see what's going on here? You think your store is only for the rich and famous, don't you? Well, let me tell you something, your attitude is what's truly beneath you." Laughing with his staff, Thomas dismissed me with a wave. I stormed out, disgusted. I didn't need anything from that store. Later, I bought a different gift, but that encounter left a sour taste in my mouth. Finally, the day arrived for Ruby's parents to meet with us. As we headed toward the traditional restaurant, I could see Jake was nervous. "Don't worry," I reassured him. "Ruby's parents are probably nice people." We were shown to a room with a chair and a table, and waiting for us were Ruby and her parents. But when I saw Ruby's father, I froze. It was Thomas, the same man from the store. Is something wrong, Dad? Jake asked, noticing my shock. I quickly masked my surprise. No, nothing at all, but I couldn't shake the feeling that today was going to be more complicated than I had ever anticipated. Ruby's father smiled warmly, shaking my hand as he greeted us. The polite, professional Thomas the First saw now was a far cry from the man who had humiliated me in the store. He seemed to have forgotten our previous encounter altogether. Nice to meet you, he said with a smile, inviting me to sit down. Looking forward to today. As I sat there, I realized with a quiet sense of irony that while he didn't remember me, I certainly wouldn't forget him, but for Jake's sake, I had to stay focused on the day ahead. This was about his future, not my past grievances. Where did you meet my daughter, Ruby? Thomas asked, his voice full of curiosity, his demeanor completely different from the arrogant man I had faced just days before. It was time for me to swallow my pride and let Jake's happiness take center stage.
The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically as I made my revelation. Thomas, now looking as though he had seen a ghost, struggled to compose himself. His face, once filled with disdain and arrogance, contorted into a mix of confusion and disbelief. The others in the room, people Thomas probably considered his equals or superiors, looked at him with a mixture of amusement and disapproval. Majority shareholder? What are you talking about? Thomas sputtered, his voice trembling slightly. I gave him a slow, deliberate smile. You see, Thomas, your company, the one you've built upon the legacy of your ancestors, it's actually a business I've been involved with for years. I've held a significant stake in it, quietly watching it grow, but never needing to flaunt it like you do. It seems you didn't do your homework, did you? The shock was evident on Thomas's face. His arrogance had blinded him to the possibility that someone like me, a man with only a middle school education, in his mind, could have anything to do with his world of high-end apparel. But there I was, in the midst of his precious circle, not only as an investor but as the person who controlled a portion of the wealth he took so much pride in. I continued, my voice growing more confident as I relished the shift in power. I didn't come here to flaunt my wealth or to try to prove anything to you, Thomas, but I will say this, you have no right to treat my son like that. He's a hard-working, honest man who deserves your respect, not your condescension, and you will treat him as such if you want to continue being associated with any part of the business I've helped build. The room was silent for a long moment as everyone absorbed my words. Thomas, now visibly shaken, struggled to find a response. His gaze flickered between me and the others in the room, unsure how to regain his footing. Apologize to my son, I commanded, my tone cold and unyielding. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as though trying to find the right words that might still salvage his pride. But it was too late, the damage had been done, and his facade of superiority had been shattered in front of his peers. With a final look at him, I turned to the others in the room. This isn't just about business, it's about treating people with dignity and respect, no matter their background. If you can't respect that, then we have nothing further to discuss. I left the room with a sense of accomplishment. As I walked out, I heard the murmurs behind me, some of admiration, some of discomfort, but I didn't care. I knew I had done the right thing for Jake, for Ruby, and for my own peace of mind. As I met Jake outside the building, his face lit up with relief and gratitude. Dad, you were amazing, I didn't expect that. You're my son, I said, smiling back at him. I'll always stand up for you. And with that, we walked away together, ready to face whatever came next, stronger and more united than ever.
I own more than half of the company's shares, and though I sit in a wheelchair, my presence commands attention at shareholder meetings. Yesterday, I called for an emergency meeting, and today, the shareholders filed in, acknowledging my request with polite smiles. As the door closed behind the last of them, I turned to face Thomas, whose wide eyes flickered nervously. Thank you for attending at such short notice, I said calmly, my voice steady, though my words carried weight. Thomas stiffened, unable to hide his panic. What gratitude? He asked, clearly caught off guard. As the principal shareholder, I've worked diligently as an investor, I continued, my gaze locking onto him. Even from my wheelchair, I analyze market trends and mentor up-and-coming talent. The profits from my investments have exceeded hundreds of millions, enabling me to fund countless ventures. As a shareholder, I have the power to influence company policies and decisions, including the appointment and dismissal of executives. I paused, savoring the tension in the room, and today, I propose the dismissal of President Thomas. Fire me? You're out of your mind, Thomas blurted out, his face flushing with rage. He took a step toward the door, but the shareholders quickly moved to block his exit. I wasn't surprised. Last night, when I briefed them on the situation, they had already agreed to stand by my side. The vote of no confidence was almost certain. Considering your recent behavior, striking the son of the principal shareholder, appropriate sanctions are necessary, I added, letting my words hang in the air. The tension in the room grew thicker as Thomas began to sweat, his facade cracking under the pressure, but he threw his head back and let out a mocking laugh. Haha, you think you can intimidate me? The legacy of my family won't crumble in my generation. He glanced around at the shareholders, trying to rally them to his side. If you fire me, the company will fail. Our brand stands tall because of its 100-year history. I have plans to merge it with another company that I've been working with, he declared, his voice rising with feigned confidence. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. You mean an absorption merger? I said, my voice smooth but firm. Your company will be absorbed by another, and you'll lose your position as president. The room fell silent. Thomas's face drained of color, his confidence faltering. What? I won't allow that. His defiance was quickly replaced by fury. I won't let someone who knows nothing about this family business take it from me. I stood up, steadying myself in my wheelchair. I can't allow the injustice done to my son to go unanswered, I said, locking eyes with him. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as we squared off. The room caught between us. Thomas pointed at me, a sinister smile curling on his lips. You claim he was harmed, but where's the proof? He sneered. Without proof, your accusations are nothing but baseless lies. You should be begging for forgiveness, not accusing me. His voice echoed through the room, and the shareholders exchanged uncertain glances. But I had already anticipated his move. I have proof, I replied coolly. As I spoke, I gestured for the assistant to begin. A projector clicked on, casting an image onto the screen. The video played, showing a quiet dinner with our families at a restaurant, filmed from above by a security camera. Thomas froze as the footage revealed him clearly striking Jake. His face contorted as he recognized what he had done. What is this? When did you get this video? He stammered, his panic now palpable. I smirked. I secured this footage after Jake was sent to the hospital yesterday. I went back to the restaurant and purchased it from the owner. You bribed them? What kind of man are you? Thomas hissed, but I remained unfazed. I don't care for your accusations, I replied, my voice cutting through the tension. The video continued to play, showing Thomas berating us before he struck Jake. The shareholders gasped in horror. Then the footage cut to us leaving the restaurant, on our way to the hospital, while Thomas stayed behind. But the video didn't end there. It showed Thomas later, berating his wife and slapping her when she dared to speak against him. Since I'm your husband, you'll obey without question, he spat, his face twisted in cruelty. The video ended with his wife in tears, the silence in the room deafening as the last image lingered. The screen went black. That's the evidence, I said, my voice low and steady. A video of President Thomas assaulting my son. And the last part? That was just a bonus. Thomas was pale, trembling in front of the screen, his arrogance shattered. The room was deathly silent as the reality of his actions set in. The shareholders were no longer on his side. They glared at him, the man who had shown such disdain for them, for their investments, and for their dignity. His fate was sealed. You insulted the very people who fund this company, I said, my tone mocking. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done? Thomas floundered, looking around at the shareholders, who were now united in their contempt for him. I'll increase the dividends. I'll do anything. Just forgive me, he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. But it was too late. The damage was done. We can't forgive someone who has insulted us behind our backs, one of the shareholders muttered, and the others nodded in agreement. Thomas's face twisted in defeat as he sank to his knees, begging for mercy, but I refused to relent. My goal is simple, remove you from the presidency, I said coldly. He tried to claw his way back. Please, I'll give you anything. I'll give you my daughter, Ruby. She's a fine woman, raised strictly. Take her, please. His words struck me like a slap. To offer his own daughter, to treat her like a mere bargaining chip, was a level of degradation I couldn't stomach. Don't insult me. Your daughter is not a bargaining tool. Ruby's decision was clear in that moment. I choose Jake, she said, stepping forward alongside her mother, both of them resolute. We're leaving you, father. With a final, bitter look at Thomas, Ruby and her mother walked out of his life. They had cut the ties that bound them to him. Back in the conference room, the shareholders, seeing Ruby's and her mother's defiance, knew the man they had once supported was no longer fit to lead. Those in favor of removing President Thomas, please applaud, I announced. The applause was slow at first, but it grew until it echoed through the room, sealing Thomas's fate. He crumpled, unable to process what had just happened. This is the end of your glorious life, I said, my words sharp as a blade. Your foolishness has cost you everything. Thomas collapsed to the floor, his sobs echoing through the room. The emergency shareholder meeting was concluded. And so, the company was absorbed through a merger, Thomas stripped of his position. The once proud legacy of the Thomas family came to a crashing halt. The revelations of his cruelty were exposed, and the company's reputation took a hit that could never be repaired. Thomas's fortune dwindled. New businesses he attempted to start crumbled under the weight of his debts. His mansion was seized, and his life became a parade of failure. The once untouchable man was reduced to nothing, his name tarnished beyond repair. As I reflect on it all, a sense of satisfaction settles over me. This was more than just about business. It was about standing up for my son, for what's right, and for watching Thomas unravel as the world he built crumbled beneath his feet.